Monday was a double day in terms of running, so the first run was slightly quicker. This was about 8 miles at a bit of a steadier pace, and then I went for a swim at lunch and then joined an evening run. So my evening run was only a short 4 to 5 miles at more of an easy pace this time. Tuesday went down to the track, so a bit more volume in my track session this week. Up to 8k of total volume. So I set out and did a 1 mile tempo to start with. This was just under 6-minute mile pace, which for me is pretty good at the moment. I then got into 14 by 400s. So I started off and did 4 by 400s while Sam and Dan were still warming up their session, and then their session was 800. So this allowed me to run the second half of their 800 as my 400, and it meant that setting off slightly in front gave them something to chase on their second lap, and it kept me honest to try and post decent times for my 400s. So my 400s were in mainly the high 70s, quickest being about 75 and the slowest being about 79. So I was quite pleased with this session, quite a bit of volume, 1 or 2k more than last week's session. I felt like I was hitting some good paces on there. Tuesday night I had an easy 35-40 minutes just up and down the trail. It's nice to run at a bit slower pace after that track session to flush my legs out a bit. So then rolled into Wednesday. We're off up to the river again on Wednesday, so this has been where we've been doing our sort of more moderate and longer runs. So for me, this was a 10-mile run with Layla, so we did about 7:25 per mile in the end, so a bit of a steady pace run for me. Not quite an easy run, but still sort of conversational pace run. So this brings me nicely on to this morning's run on Thursday. So this morning is a tempo session, and it's how I'd like to structure my weeks with a tempo Thursday. So thinking back to last week, I did 4 miles of tempo on this loop, so it's a 1 mile loop, and I averaged around 6:35 per mile. So I'm looking for somewhere similar but for a longer distance, so I'm going to try and push that distance up and maintain a similar sort of pace. So what have I got to go off in the past? So this past week I've obviously done a lot of training. This probably won't take effect until the next week or two when I get back home. I'm also going to be a bit fatigued in the legs and all over generally with this last week I've had a race on the Sunday, but I also know that I did the race at 6:40 per mile, a half marathon. So if I can do a half marathon at 6:40 per mile, then I expect that I can do 6 miles at a similar pace today. So that is the aim today. I'm going to set off at that 6:40 per mile pace, which is slightly slower than I did last week, hoping that I can build into this tempo and drop the paces down in the last sort of couple of miles if I'm feeling good, or if not, just hang on to that 6:40. It would be a solid session. Ready for mile 1, off we go. Mile 1, 6:40. Mile 3, 6:40 again. Mile 4, 6:40. And mile 5 was a 6:39. So you might notice a bit of change of scenery as I'm on the cool down back home now. I did actually stop 1 mile short. I'll go through that because psychologically not very good cutting session short. It's a bad habit I want to get out of, but physiologically with this week I think it will just keep me a bit fresher going into a bit of a longer run tomorrow, so give me a better chance of getting the distance I want in the long run tomorrow. On Friday I'd set myself to do 18 miles for the long run, so I was looking to be joined for the first half of this run, about 6 miles or so with Layla, so that was good to have a bit of company and make the miles go by a bit quicker in the first half of this run. But when I did get to probably about 8 or 9 miles, I was starting to struggle a bit in the heat. It did get up to about 18 to 20 degrees, which I've not been used to running in back home, and I really did have to nip into the shops and get some water to rehydrate. I didn't think that I was particularly going at a pace that was too quick at sort of high 7-minute miles. I've run quite comfortably all week, and even quite comfortably back home when I've not been as fit. So it really is a reminder just to myself to run how I feel on the day. And I did go back out after that 9 mile to finish the other half of a run. I had about 10 minutes or so just to cool myself down, get some fluids on board, and then did go out at a sensible pace really. So really slowed it down to over 8-minute miles for the first 4 or 5 miles until I felt that I was into a bit more of a rhythm again, and could get to that 18 miles and complete the run. So I was back home on Saturday, and a fresh reminder for how cold it is back home, as it was just over freezing, about 20 degrees lower than my run on Friday. So as is my routine on Saturdays, I like to do a 3-mile run to park run, do park run, and then a 3-mile run back. And if I'm feeling like I've got a bit of freshness in my legs, I'll go for that as a additional tempo session for park run, and go for trying to get a good time over that 3 miles there. But as it was on Saturday this week, my legs just didn't really have it in them today, and I didn't feel that I could push around park run. So my park run time was around 22:30, so I just sort of continued the pace of the easy run down there, maybe upped it a little bit at park run as you got chatting along the run, and then ran back for 3 miles as well. So where does that leave me as a week as a whole? So stats wise, in terms of mileage, it's 78 miles this week, which with over 6 days of running, so I had a whole rest day on Sunday as I plan to do after the trip. It's a really good return for this week, and the highest mileage target that I've done for quite a while really. Probably since the last time I've been out in Spain. I don't think I've topped 70 odd miles back home, so I've increased from 75 miles last week to 78 this week, and I'll be looking to drop back down a little bit lower now I'm back at home and back working. So in those 78 miles, I had a tempo session, I had an interval session, and I also had a lot of easy running within there and a long run. So a good mix in there, and it's probably something of the routine that I want to try and keep back home, but probably not as many of the double days, and there's not as much volume within the whole week. Another aspect of my training to note whilst I was out in Spain is I did a bit of swimming. So I went for either 3 or 4 swims while I was out there, only sort of half an hour at a time. And I felt that this helped me in 2 ways really. First of all, the recovery. So I felt that after a hard run, after some hard mileage, when I've got aching muscles, aching joints, the swim was really good to just go out and promote that recovery. You have some good benefits of being in water, and they do obviously promote your recovery there. So the recovery side of things was good. And I also think that swimming adds as a free extra little bit of strength and core training for me. So with swimming, you're predominantly using your arms, your chest, your back, and your core a lot to keep streamlined and keep afloat on top of the water. And it's the opposite muscles to what you kind of use predominantly in running, which is your legs, hamstrings and glutes. So gives them a rest and works the other muscles in your body that you probably neglect with just running full time. So with not going to the gym much and not doing much strength and conditioning, I think that swimming is a way that if I can find time for it to fit into my schedule, maybe once a week, once every other week, it will be really beneficial to my running. So then let's talk about what my plans are going forward and going into the spring in terms of races, in terms of training. So in terms of races, firstly, I enjoy doing Santa Pola half marathon. It's the first half marathon I've done in 2 years now, which is quite a long gap. And I want to get in more shorter races in between marathon blocks. I think I've been guilty in the past of just entering a marathon and doing maybe 1 or 2 races in the build up to this. And I enjoy my running, I enjoy racing. I like to get out there and race over the shorter distances, even if it is within a marathon block. I can flex my training around so that I'm still getting my long runs in, I'm still getting the training in required to have a good marathon, as well as enjoy the shorter distances. So with this being said, I've entered the Bolsover 10K, which is a local 10K to me in Derbyshire. on the 9th of February, I believe. So I've got about 2 weeks now to do a little bit of shorter speed endurance specific work. So I'm thinking sort of 5k, 10k kind of work within my interval sessions, keep my tempo running, but maybe make this a little bit shorter to try and get some faster paces that I want to achieve at this 10k in a couple of weeks time. So that's the plan. I want to get racing over the 10k, over any distance between sort of 5k to half marathon really. Over spring I've entered into Ashby 20, which will be a good test of how I get on and see if I'm in shape to do a marathon later on in the spring. So what will the training look like for this? And it's pretty simple. It's going to stay pretty same structure to what I've been aiming to do these last sort of, I don't know, 4 to 6 weeks since I did Valencia Marathon. So what I'm aiming to do is hit 60 miles per week roughly. I'm going to try and do 2 sessions per week. Most importantly, going to be my interval session earlier on in the week, which is my hard track-based session. I'm then going to do a tempo session, whether that's a separate tempo session later on in the week or done as part of a parkrun effort. And then I'm going to get a long run in each week, with all my other runs being easy running in between this. The only exception to this is that I may pop in 1 steady run per week, which is slightly quicker than easy pace, and probably some of the paces that I've been running whilst I've been out in Spain. I don't think it does me any harm to do that once a week, but doing more than that is probably not so beneficial to my training. So time for a few thank yous at the end of this video. So first of all to Joe and Stu at CC Training Spain. So this is where we stopped and booked with for this warm weather training for the last couple of weeks. So I'd fully recommend it to anyone looking to go and do a bit of warm weather training, particularly if you've got a bit of flexibility with your job and can get abroad and go and train in the winter months and work from a remote location. I did book this as holiday, so I was full-time just running and enjoying it as a holiday, but I know that you can go out and have the facilities to work from there as well as do your running in warmer weather. So with Joe and Stu both being runners, the attention to detail to have everything in the setup so that you could just go out and train as if you're at home really, but in better conditions, was fabulous. They were really responsive with any requests for sort of running routes, going to races, any recommendations of local things to see and do, games of paddle for example. I thought that it was a great experience and I'd recommend to go back. It's the 3rd time that I've been back now and I'll be going back again in future. And another big thanks to my housemates while we're out there. So Dan and Sam have been a really good help for me this last 2 weeks with my own training. Both being a lot quicker than I am, it's enabled to sort of pull me along and push me along on sessions, pull me along on some of my other runs as well. And it's been good to see how they train and go about to get to the level that they're at. So it's been good to get out on the bike, see them on their tempo and their interval sessions, but also to join them on their easy runs too. Thanks for watching this week's video, and I'll see you next week in the next one.